Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The Mayor's Chaplain has not arrived as yet, and we would normally call on Councillor Jackson to say the prayers. So it is left to me and your good selves, if you'd be so kind as to join in with me. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us, for ever and ever. Amen. Thank you. Please be seated. Well, that was very decent, I'll be honest. Thank you, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Are there any apologies for absence? Thank you, Councillor Coleman.
I believe you've got Councillor Debbie Coleman. She's on training, council training. Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jackson, Councillor Debbie Coleman are both on course, on council business.
Yeah.
Thank you. And now we move to declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? None whatsoever. Minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of September 2017, pages 1 to 6. Are we all agreed? True record? All in favour? Thank you. I do have one announcement, and I'm sorry to say it is sad news. The council has been informed that sadly former councillor Jebson has recently passed away after suffering a terminal illness. Our thoughts are with his family and friends. Councillor Jebson was a Conservative councillor who represented Ankersholme Ward from 2007 to 2011. If we could all be upstanding for 1 minute silence, please. Thank you all. Executive reports. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Delighted to present my report. More than happy to answer any questions on it. Brief update, as members will know, myself and Alan Cavill were in Florida last week. A number of very useful meetings, not least with the company with whom we've signed an exclusivity deal on the central station site. Obviously, because of the non-disclosure agreement that goes with that, I can't say any more at this time other than to say that I'm very pleased with the progress that's been made. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Seem to be a bit lost. Sorry. We've lost one. You will forgive me a moment. Thank you. Are there any questions and comments on a page-by-page basis? Thank you. We start with page 7. Thank you. Councillor Galley.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are two types of answers Councillor Blackburn could give me to this question. There's a political one which I hope he doesn't give me, which will be, oh, it's all Tory cuts and it's all your fault. Or there's an economic one, and I'm hoping he gives me the economic one. The question itself is regards some statements that came from Lancashire County Council a few weeks ago in terms of their budget planning. And it roughly came out of the meeting that there was roughly only 18 months of reserves left in the council parts, and there was a number of concerns about the council's ability to commit to all its funding, etc., etc. My main question, though, is regarding our financial sustainability strategy and where we currently sat. If we are in a more sustainable place than Lancashire and won't have to be putting out a similar scarier message.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Mrs. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. I wondered if Councillor Blackburn could explain to me, because I've got a bit lost on this, that when we actually borrow money, and we have to pay interest, of course, and at this moment in time, the interest rate is very low. If we have a long-term agreement with somebody, say for something like 20 years, 25 years, does the interest rate stay at the amount it was at the start of the loan, or will it go up? And if it's going up and interest rates are going up, isn't that a worry to the council? I hope you understand what I'm asking. And also, I was speaking to Councillor Galley the other day about this, and we were discussing the cuts to the council funding, which, you know, we all agree they have been very, very difficult to manage. But we do get some money from the government for different projects. And if you quickly look through this one agenda that's only very thin, I've just quickly counted up some. We got 2.34 million for something, 11.4 million. I mean, all that must help. I know it's not as much as the cuts, but I do think that, you know, sometimes we should just step back and think about the amount of money that we're getting from the government for different projects. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any more questions on page 7? Any questions or comments regarding? Thank you. Page 8. Oh, thank you, Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief question about the museum plan that's been announced. My concern regarding the former museum plan, a number of mistakes, if I was being less charitable, issues were raised about the actual plan itself. So instead of it becoming a Blackpool museum, it started to become more of a museum that happened to be in Blackpool. And they were very different from what we set out to achieve. How are we going to do it differently so any money that's spent on this museum actually works where the last plan didn't? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any more questions? Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Then we will go on to any other general comments, questions. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I just follow on from my colleague, Councillor Callow's remarks in regarding funding? So often does this council criticise the government for their economic strategy in terms of fundings of cuts. I'm not going to defend that. You know, my own views on the cuts are they were a little bit too heavy, a little bit too soon, but we're living with them. But as she quite rightly says, in this report alone, £50 million from indirect and direct funding from this government to Blackpool's Labour Council. I think that's rather generous, and I think we should thank the government for doing that. Also, the remarks of, well, laugh if you like, perhaps they might be listening. So you don't think you need the money? You're laughing at it.
Sorry, I can't allow you to comment from... Thank you. Please continue.
All right. Can I also just ask about the Florida trip, etc., etc.? Could he outline if we are getting direct professional help with this in terms of choosing the right type of attraction or development on that site? I'm sure the answer will be yes, but I'm not so sure if the qualification of our senior officer, with the greatest of respect, and the leader himself are fully qualified or experienced in operating attractions and developments, apart from, of course, the time you were with Madame Tussauds. And the Pleasure Beach, yes, of course. Yeah. Does that qualify us to make the right decisions, or are we getting good professional consideration and consultation? And could you tell us who that could be from? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mrs Callum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're all absolutely delighted with some of the developments that hopefully are going to take place in the town, such as a new hotel and the conference centre. But I've mentioned this before to the leader, that we really have to look after what we've got and keep our eye on the ball. I did ask him about the Yates's side here in a conservation area earlier in the year, and I was informed that planning was going to start on that site in May. The leader did say that he would never again quote a date of when somebody had told him planning was going to start. But we've got Yates's and it's still there, and there's fly posting on there. It's an absolute eyesore. We've got this building here that used to be the Clifton Hotel, and on the promenade it needs a coat of paint. It's an absolute disgrace in a prime spot. I have mentioned this before.
So, sorry, Mr Mayor, I didn't catch which building Councillor Mrs Callow was talking about.
It was the Clifton Hotel, and it's now a travel lodge or something like that, that really does need a coat of paint, and it needs some urgent attention. And also in residential areas, I know he's going to tell me we haven't got the money for enforcing, but if we let these go down, good residential areas, the few that we've got left in the town, such as felling trees that don't need to be felled. We've got front gardens that resemble builders' yards. We've got people that are now advertising their businesses on their gateposts and walls. And some of these problems that I've been trying to resolve have been going on since September of last year. I know they're not the most important thing in the world, but you only need one or two people in a good area to start to behave like this. And it causes great distress to people who live there who are trying to keep up their standards. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I think I had Councillor Galley first.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Galley. All right.
It's only that I don't often argue with Councillor Maxine Callow, but I'm going to, because how does she expect the leader of the council to know anything about the Clifton when he's swanning in Florida? You know, and we don't know what he's doing there anyway, do we?
Thank you. Councillor Galley.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a brief question for the leader. I wonder if he could provide an update to the Chamber on the Star Buddies peer support review that we discussed and met about, and where we're up to with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that you wanted to take... Oh, sorry, Councillor Humphries, I thought you were putting your hand up. Does that conclude? Thank you. Councillor Clapham.
Mr Mayor, I was hosting a Sunday lunch last Sunday for about 60 people, and somebody stood up and said, "Can you tell me about that plane that's been seen landing in Blackpool Airport?" I said, "What plane? Which plane?" And it's covered in Disney logos. And I thought, I have no idea about this. I know that Councillor Blackburn had been to America, and I thought, I know he's influential, but I can't imagine them lending him a plane to come home. But does anybody know about this plane that's been seen landing on the airport? Because I know nothing at all about it. But you know how people talk, 1 and 1 makes 22. Crazy world.
Thank you, Councillor. Does that conclude it? Then I think it's back to you, sir. Thank you. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. The financial problems of Lancashire County Council are well documented. I understand that some steps have been taken to help to close the £240 million black hole that they have publicly referred to. in their finances. We do not find ourselves in a similar position as is outlined in the medium-term financial plan, despite having been the hardest hit local authority, the hardest hit unitary authority in the whole of England and Wales, having made difficult decisions in our early years in office, and we will need to make further difficult decisions in the upcoming budget. Our finances are robust, and I have no such concerns about Blackpool Council in terms of its long-term financial sustainability. Councillor Mrs Callow, in the vast majority of cases, we would never fix an interest rate for a long-term loan for exactly the reason you outlined. We would do a deal which would be base rate plus X%. So as the base rate, were the base rate to rise, we would not be exposed in terms of our lending. However, there was a survey conducted of sort of finance directors, bankers and other alleged experts in this matter, where they were asked when they expected interest rates to reach the dizzy heights of 3%. Bearing in mind that they were in the sort of early 90s, they got as far as 15%. And the consensus of all of these financial experts was that they expected UK interest rates to reach the dizzy heights of 3% in 2043. So I don't think we don't want to, I'm not overly worried about it. Government funding streams, yes, individual capital schemes, for which when they come along we are very grateful, but they are a competitive process. Our officers and our members put in huge amounts of work bidding for things like the conference centre. So I wouldn't suggest that this is just governmental largesse, so they just come along and say, please, have some money. But they make us work very hard for that. You are absolutely correct, through you, Mr Mayor, Councillor Mrs Callow is absolutely correct in saying that those funding streams do not in any way make up for the £550 million that's cumulatively been removed from us since 2010. But nonetheless, we are grateful for every penny that we get. You wouldn't expect me to make too much fuss about that, for obvious reasons, because I know I can rely on you to do it. A gentle reminder, and it's accepted in the spirit in which it was offered. Councillor Galley, the museum, I'm quite happy to accept that you know far more about the detail of this than I do, because I am not and have not been deeply involved in the content of the museum. If you have concerns that mistakes have been made earlier on in the project and you remain concerned that you think they're still being made now, I'm perfectly happy to meet with you to talk about it. But I have overall strategic responsibility for the project. I don't get involved in the detail of it. Councillor Williams, well, you asked the same question as Councillor Mrs Callow. Will I tell you who's advising us on the Central Station site deal? No, I won't. Councillor Mrs Callow, the Yateses site, Councillor Campbell has just told me you can expect site work to start on that site early in the new year, by which she means 2018.
2020.
That's what she says. The Ibis Hotel that you mentioned, I will speak to enforcement officers and see what we've done and what more we can do. General residential street scene issues, I recognise some of the points that she raises. If she's having particular difficulties getting those individual cases progressed, if she'd like to send me the details, I'll see if we can speed that process up. We do enforcement. I think a tree was mentioned. I understand the tree in question, so I do details sometimes, you know. The tree in question was diseased and either has been or is being replaced by the ward councillors. Councillor Galley, the Star Buddies scheme, a further meeting has taken place between Councillor Cross, myself. I've asked the Chief Executive and Merle Davis from our Better Start scheme to meet again to progress the matter. Councillor Callow doesn't know what I was doing in Orlando. I was at the International Association of Amusement Parks exhibit as has been reported widely in the press. It was the same one that I went to last year. It's the same one that I or one of my cabinet will be going to next year. There are 34,000 people attend that. over 1,100 stall holders, and they deal with every aspect of what it is to be in the entertainment and tourism industry. I am absolutely staggered that when you were the leader of the council, you didn't attend events like that. And I would suggest through you, Mr Mayor, that if Councillor Callow had have attended events like that, he would have had a much better understanding of why it is important that we do so. Councillor, I swan about all over the place, Mr Mayor, as Councillor Campbell and Councillor Kane will testify. But I like to think it makes a difference. And if nothing else, it gets me out of the way, which despite the fact that they pretend to be unhappy about it, I don't think they are really. Councillor Clapham, if only I could have persuaded Disney to charter a plane to bring me home. Unfortunately, I didn't even try, but now you've put the idea in my head, I might do that next year. I've no idea, but I'll ask people that have more to do with the airport than me and see if I can find out. But we should probably never know. But whatever it is, it's nothing to do with me. Mr Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, thank you. We now move on to Executive Member Report to the Council. Deputy Leader of the Council, Councillor Gillian Campbell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Delighted to present my report. Happy to take any questions, but I've just got a couple of updates, if I may. You can see on here we talk about the Bridges Renewal Programme. I can tell you that good progress is being made on both of the bridges that are shut at the moment, both Harrowside and Squires Gate, with completion by March 2018, as stated in my report. But we are hopeful that the Harrowside one will actually be open before that. So it's going really well at the moment. As you may have seen, Strictly was in town once again. Made us look absolutely fantastic. Really good. I did actually see that one day alone we had 400 mentions in the media, online, websites, newspapers. Also, you may have seen that our bathing water quality has once again got excellent for Blackpool South, with good for Central, North and Bispham. And just one more thing at Anchors Home Sea Defences. The UK Managing Director of Balfour Beatty has agreed to furnish us with the outcome of an investigation of the slab movement at the north end of the scheme by the end of November. But also delighted to say that the Environment Agency are extremely happy with it. So with that, Mr Mayor, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions on right? Thank you. We have page 11. Any questions? Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Callow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't know if I'm going to be told that I'm out of order here, but visitor numbers, I'm delighted that they're going up, and I'm sure that they'll be going up even more if people out there have an experience like Councillor Callow have had. We were booked to go on a holiday with Chewy, and I will say it in public, with Chewy, and we were going in January. And just a week ago, I got a letter from them to say that we were no longer flying from Blackpool, from Manchester. They said that we were going to be flying from Newcastle. How kind of them. And that we were going to arrive back at 1 o'clock in the morning, stuck in Newcastle in the middle of January. And if other people out there are having experiences like that with big operators and nightmares at airports, then more and more people are going to come to Blackpool, and I certainly will be delighted if the visitor figures continue to rise. And thank you for your patience with me going off the subject slightly, but I did want to say something in public about Chewy. And don't book with them. No, don't book with them. Don't book with them, because we certainly won't anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Callow. Did I see your hand, Mr. Callow? Thank you. Councillor Callow, do forgive me.
Thank you. So, Strictly, how many towns was Blackpool mentioned? Well, isn't it fortunate that I obtained the tower buildings and the ballroom for this town? For this town. No, you will know that I've never mentioned it before. Nor the Winter Gardens, nor the Golden Mile. But there you are. That's the way of it. And a lot of work went into that. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate that.
I'm sure it's been all our privilege. Thank you, Councillor. Are there any more on page 11? Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the update on the Anchors Home scheme. I hope the investigation and the inspection isn't just going to circle on that particular point, because we are getting reports, Little Bisping for instance, and one or two other areas, that there are potential failings as well. We'll be happy to share those with you. It was something that both Councillor Guy and myself were extremely disappointed, because we've been advocates and ambassadors for this scheme. We've got a fantastic promenade, it's just absolutely stunning. But we just need to make sure that these defences are going to last, as they said they would, to the next 100 years. Thank you. Have you any idea, by the way, I'm sorry, when the work to repair it will start? No. And just another point, did you know that we obtained the Winter Gardens?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Are there any more questions on page 11? Page 12? Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to refer to the article regarding 21 Charles Street. Myself and the Mayor and Councillor Coleman, Gary Coleman in this case, we went down to the site on the night of the gas explosion to the Salvation Army, and how organised they were supporting the families and the children. They had crayons, all stuff going on, and the staff of Blackpool Council was very supportive in organising and finding accommodation, place where to stay and go, and helping the families out. So I want to say on record a big thank you to the Salvation Army, the staff of Blackpool Council, and also the fire, police and ambulance crew was on site as well doing helping them out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If I may mention, take this opportunity, we were down on the night very early. It hadn't happened long, and things were all organised by the emergency services and Salvation Army. And if I may take this opportunity, and do forgive me, everyone was wonderful, and I congratulate them all, and I think Blackpool owes them a very big thank you. Thank you. Are there any more questions on page 12? Page 13. Have you noticed when I speak, everyone shuts up? Page 14. Thank you. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a question about the Grundy Art Gallery. There's been a number of concerns over the recent years, Mr Mayor, about the Grundy, in the sense that we don't really feel it's reached its full potential, especially in terms of when it reaches out to the residents of the town and also visitors. Visitors will say they didn't know it was there. Residents will probably say they didn't even know it was here. So my question really is, for the new curator, do we have any targets for them to achieve in terms of either the types of all-round types of attractions or displays they put on, or in terms of the educational reach that they use for the children of the town, or even in visitor numbers themselves? Because they say it's an asset that we have, we're lucky to have it, but at the moment it's very much a sleeping giant. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any more questions on page 14? Thank you. Page 15. Councillor Galley, it was a waste of time sitting down.
It was, wasn't it? I should have just stood up. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. It was just a follow-up on cosy homes in Lancashire. Not so much about this scheme, but it is noted in terms of the achievements with Echo. There are certain cities around the world, that, including Vancouver, that are really pushing their green credentials at the moment, and are using the planning process to push for solar panels wherever practical. And I just wondered, as a councillor, in terms of our local plan as we move forwards, if we have the same vision for the use of solar energy in terms of the planning process, in terms of making either our council-owned buildings put solar panels on where appropriate, or any new builds put them on.
Thank you. Any more questions? Page 15. General questions? Oh, sorry, did we get one on... Sorry, was that on page 15? Was it? Do forgive me, Councillor, I didn't see it. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Scott.
Regarding cosy homes in Lancashire again, excuse me, I'm aware that quite a lot of cavity wall installation has taken place over the last few years, which is now being found to be unsuitable for seaside properties or certain properties. And I'd like to know if the council or the deputy leader is able to tell us how many properties might have been affected or how many complaints have been received by the council regarding cavity wall installation that's failed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Now we move... is this... Please do. Yes, on page 15.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, regarding the cavity wall insulation, there are several companies now actually approaching residents in the Blackpool area offering to claim compensation for some of the dampness that this insulation has caused. I'm not sure who pays this compensation or where it comes from, but I certainly wouldn't like it to come out of any council coffers on any council-assisted scheme. So could we please have some clarity on that and get some information? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And now we move to general questions. Thank you. Sorry, forgive me.
That's all right. Two questions, Mr Mayor. One on selective licensing. I would just like to remind some councillors that we are not against selective licensing, which I understand they've been telling their residents. We actually introduced it. What I'm not against but concerned about is the management of it. And I've got some figures for Waterloo which are quite interesting. I'll just summarise one or two of them. And bear in mind, these are small numbers in some cases to start with, so the percentage leaps look quite high. But violence against the person against 2016-17 is up 48%. Assault with injury is up 51%. Wounding is up 100%. Harassment is up 75%. As you know, Waterloo is a selective licence area. Theft. Burglary is actually down, or the total theft is actually down, so crime in that range is heading the right way. But shoplifting is up 600%. 112% theft from the person. Sexual assaults are up 33%. Arson, again, small numbers, but it's double what they were. All domestic abuse is up 79%. Alcohol-related crime is up 81%. Alcohol-related violence is up 114%. And yet, amazingly, when you get to the bottom of the report, it says antisocial behaviour is down 34%. Well, all the above are antisocial behaviour. How the heck, I nearly swore then, how the heck do we get this ridiculous figure? And it goes to my point that we are not against selective licensing. We think it's great, and we want it to be managed properly. But by these results, there seems to be something wrong. So I'd be delighted if the portfolio holder could share the information with us. On the second one, I'm disappointed that Councillor Jackson isn't here, because I would have liked him to answer this question as the portfolio holder. And I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the traffic chaos which is happening in Blackpool at the moment, only to be compounded further when we close Dixon Road, Corn Street, King Street in the next couple of weeks. These are works that are going to go on till 2019. I understand if the improvements are necessary, if the improvements will benefit the town, such as new road surfacing, it has to be done in the shoulder months. We don't want this to be happening in 2018 summer season. But by the same token, the Christmas season in Blackpool for traders is a make or break situation in many cases. And I've got traders phoning me saying they were going to refuse to pay their council tax. You'll have to take them to court. They're expecting the lowest footfall over Christmas period shopping and, of course, the New Year sales ever. That the traffic diversions are chaotic. Even our own transport and bus drivers are finding it hard to follow. Get behind a bus coming down the promenade, you'll see them indicate 2 or 3 times down the wrong section. This is badly thought out. It's a stab in the back to the retailers and traders of Blackpool, and we really should be doing something about this. I don't care if we stop the works and start again in January, but at least give the traders a break, because they are worried for their futures especially the independent traders, who we claim we support so well in Blackpool. They are suffering. And it's not just me on the other side of the chamber moaning. These are moans that I'm getting. And if you go on social media, you'll see reams of them. People are now saying they don't want the tram extension. They may have voted it before. They didn't realise what the disruption was going to cause. You've got to break eggs to make an omelette. Again, rubbish, is it? It's rubbish. Go and tell all the people out there who are moaning it's rubbish. I dare you. I dare you. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'd like to know, actually, what the council intends to do about this dire situation.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Before that, I think Councillor Stansfield, you put your hand up, did you? Thank you, Councillor Stansfield. Do forgive me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And,
As we've seen from the reports, we've got increasing visitor numbers, mainly due to the fact that we've acquired the Winter Gardens. But one thing which I would hate to blight everything is the constant thing which we must all receive, and that is fly tipping. The fly tipping costs to correct must be absolutely astronomical. Yet, this particular week, I've had cause to try to visit Blackpool Recycling Centre to find that it runs no more than part-time hours. To finish at 3:45 in an afternoon. No wonder people are fly tipping. If they can't get to tip the rubbish where they're supposed to, that is probably one reason why they're tipping them into alleys. Can we review the times that the tip is open so that we can see if we can reduce the amount of fly tipping and therefore reduce the costs that is ever increasing to correct this and try to keep the town tidy? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stanfield. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There seems to be a general desire to talk about what happened in the early months of 2011. Various people talking about what they were doing in the early months of 2011, buying the Winter Gardens and the Tower and the Golden Mile. Funnily enough, I was with the MP for Blackpool South in Parliament yesterday, and he was telling me about all the hard work he put in to that deal. And the number of people who claim credit for that makes me think that I was probably the only person who wasn't in the room while all of that was going on. But seeing as we're talking, Mr. Mayor, about what happened in early 2011, perhaps we should talk about this leaflet, which has been handed around the town in late 2010, early 2011, with a little map on it. And the little map shows you all the road closures. It shows you all the road closures because of the works that are going on for the tramway. Promenade will be closed between Ginn Square and Talbot Square from the 8th of November 2010 until the 22nd of February 2011. And then northbound from the 28th of February until the 28th of June. Southbound between Talbot Square and New Bonny Street from November till February, then between Talbot Square and New Bonny Street from February to June. So it's already been ascertained that all of these roadworks are necessary, that it's better to do them, as Councillor Williams put it, in the shoulder months. And one of the reasons we know that is because we lived through the Tory traffic chaos of last time they did this, and they had the town dug up for 18 months throughout the tourist season. So I shall take no lectures on what did and didn't happen in 2011 or how we should and shouldn't tackle the traffic flow in the town. But I do particularly want to highlight, one, this must have been approved by Councillor Callow and his cabinet, of whom a number are here now. At the bottom, in red letters, and I did like the touch of putting it in red letters, it says, it will be worth it. Well, they might want to reflect on that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Williams. Councillor Scott. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point to the speech we've just had. I think two wrongs don't make a right to close down Blackpool yet again, but that's not the point I was going to make. I just wanted to add that. At the last meeting that we had, I spoke about the Christmas markets. The Christmas markets, which I brought up in March of this year, and I was told that it would be looked at. On the last meeting we had here, Councillor Campbell said to me, it will be discussed on Monday morning. That's at the night-time economy meeting. The discussion went as follows. Christmas markets, yes. There'll be no Christmas market in Blackpool this year again. It is not seen as a viable proposition. This must be the only place in England, town or city, where a Christmas market is not seen as a viable proposition. Could you tell me the reasons why, please?
Councillor Mrs. Calvo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The council may recall that I had a notice of motion some 5 years ago opposed to phone calls to people's homes. And I got the full support of the council. We objected to it strongly because the people who are very vulnerable were receiving phone calls in their homes, unsolicited phone calls. But on the 2nd of October at 18:38, I received a phone call from somebody who told me that on behalf of Blackpool Council, she was doing a shopping in the town centre survey. I told her that I didn't approve of it. It was a waste of public money, and I was very annoyed that they'd phoned me. I explained I was a councillor and I wouldn't be participating. This lady was very, very pushy, and she kept saying, but you can still participate. And I said, absolutely no way. And I'm appalled that I've got to bring this to the council again because I'm totally opposed to phone calls in people's homes where you can have sick, lonely, vulnerable people who don't want their phones ringing at 18:38 in the evening when they want a bit of peace and quiet. And if I can just say something now about Strictly, absolutely fabulous, wonderful, and congratulations to all the production team there from the BBC. They did Blackpool proud. It couldn't have been better. If we'd spent millions, we couldn't have got such positive publicity. I was really very proud of my wonderful town and the fact that we owned the tower. And if I can just touch on Councillor Blackburn, when he read from this leaflet that went out when we were in power about the disruption, and he refers to the promenade for most of it. Now, we've got disruption not just on the promenade, but in the side streets and the main streets, the main arteries coming into Blackpool. And this isn't helping matters. It is far, far worse than it ever was when we were actually putting the new tramway in. And that was essential. We got funding from the Labour government, but that was absolutely essential to the prosperity of the Fylde coast. If that money hadn't been received, we would have had no trams on the promenade because the whole infrastructure was rotting and it was absolutely essential. So I don't agree with Councillor Blackburn for once. There was disruption on the promenade, but not in the side roads as there is at the moment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As someone who organises hospital transport around the town, I've got reports from my drivers regarding this disruption. And what they basically said to me is the main disruption is only during core hours. And that was only bad at first when people didn't know what they were doing. Once people got used to it, it started flowing. So although we do have to do this work, it is actually working. We've got to remember this town does have a code, have a crest that says progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Thank you. One speaker at a time, and it's Councillor Luke Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's just a follow-up to Councillor Galley's question about the Grundy Art Gallery. I'd like to invite himself and everybody else to an event on the 5th of December from 4 till 6 p.m. I believe everyone's got an email about it. It's meeting the new curator, talking about plans for the art gallery, which is very exciting, obviously, at the steering group last week. And also we're talking to Tanisha as well, who's the school's advisory. She gets involved with all the schools and brings them all in. She's doing fantastic work there as well. So it'd be great to see as many people as possible and discuss the art gallery and what should go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there anyone else, if there's anyone else left to speak? Thank you. On page 15, that is. Right. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That was a big list.
I'd nearly forgotten.
I know. I'm glad I wrote it all down. Okay, Councillor Mrs. Callow, your holiday flying from Newcastle. If I've learnt something tonight, it's not to book with Chewy. Thank you very much. I will make sure I don't do that.
Who needs TripAdvisor?
Indeed, we don't need TripAdvisor. Okay, although actually saying that, I've never actually flown in my life, so I would struggle. Councillor Mr. Callow, you bought the tower and the Winter Gardens, and I think maybe if we just give one more little round of applause for that, that might be nice. And yeah, fabulous, great investment, fabulous investment. Every credit to you. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Williams, reports of other problems. Obviously, I'm not aware of that, but if you could pass anything on to myself and the officers, we will look into it. But just to make it really clear that the council did not build that, so it was Balfour BA. It has a 12-year guarantee. If anything goes wrong, they have to fix it if it happens in that time. I'm sure you know that. Councillor Smith. Yes, I would like to put on record thanks for everyone who helped with the explosion. It was quite a scene. I actually came into the town centre shortly after it happened, all the blue lights and everything everywhere. Brilliant coordination and great emergency planning on behalf of everyone. So yes, record of thanks for that. Councillor Galley, Grundy Art Gallery. Yeah, Paulette, I've not had a chance to meet her myself yet, unfortunately. But I hope to do so before the Christmas period. I'm a little bit busy at the moment. But obviously we have the steering group and Councillor Luke Taylor sits on that. So obviously I will have a chat with Paulette, but the steering group will also possibly, like you say, set targets. But you're right, it is a hidden gem. I get the occasional email from members of the public to say how much they've enjoyed certain exhibitions, and that's really nice. And I'm sure she's the lady to make it even better. Cosy Homes in Lancashire. Yeah, planning process. Solar panels. This is what I've scribbled down here. It's really hard when you're doing this. Yeah, council-owned buildings. We did actually look into that a couple of years ago. But whilst we were looking, the feed-in tariffs went down. It's very technical, isn't it? Yeah. But we looked at the Winter Gardens, we looked at various places, and that's not to say we wouldn't do it in the future, but at the moment, for us as a council, it's kind of off the cards, if you will. But I think you're right, we could look at the planning process, whether or not we could actually get people to put things like that on new housing and things like that. So I'm happy to have a look at that, and I'll ask Councillor Smith to do that as well. Councillor Mrs Scott, I wasn't aware of that there was failings there. I'd have to get back to you on that. I'm not aware of anything in Blackpool, but that might just be because it's not come to my attention, so we'll get back to you on that. Councillor Williams, selective licensing. Okay, you said this a few times, Councillor Williams. It may have come to you while you were in power, but I actually introduced selective licensing, not yourselves. It may have been discussed, but it may have been too near the election. No, if you look past, the paperwork actually has my name on it. So it was me that introduced it. Yeah, the management, I mean, selective licensing is not a panacea, it's a tool. It's a tool that we can use. It's not going to cure all the world's ills, unfortunately. And when it comes to crime and antisocial behaviour and all those things that you read out, it is worrying, yeah. But with another head on, as the chair of the Be Safe Partnership, it's very complicated, but basically the way they record police crimes has changed recently. So that is inflating all of these figures. And it's not just in Blackpool, it's actually all over the country. So, I mean, I'm happy to have a discussion with you afterwards about this and try and get you some more information from the police themselves. Oh, right, okay. When? I'll make a note of that, okay, and I'll get back to you. But yeah, I stand by selective licensing completely. I think you're right. Yeah, it's a good tool. And I did actually have a meeting today to talk about the next phase of selective licensing, which will be happening in the central area. Okay, traffic chaos. Okay. Now, I understand it's incredibly difficult out there at the moment, but I am reassured that this is the worst phase. We're getting it all over and done with in one hit. I'm living through it myself. I think people don't think we live in this town, but obviously we do. I don't have a helicopter to get to work. I've been living with the United Utilities disruption myself personally, because my child goes to school in the South Shore area. It's hard, but you know, human beings are pretty resilient creatures. We go to a place, we realise we can't go there, we don't go there again, we find another route. And I think that is what's happening at the moment. It is disruptive, I get that, but it is, as Councillor Blackburn said, it will be worth it. It will definitely be worth it. And when it comes to social media, I've got to say that you're instigating a little bit of that trouble yourself, Councillor Williams, because I have seen it. And so what are we going to do? We're going to carry on, yeah? And we're going to get this phase over and done with. And further phases will be less disruptive. Councillor Stansfield, fly tipping, tip closures. Yeah, unfortunately, we've had to cut down the hours at the tip, but that's because we've had a huge cut in funding. I don't think it's any excuse whatsoever that if the tip's shut, it's okay to fly tip it. And I can just read you a couple of figures here, which I got the other day there. We have fly tipping reports to Customer First. In April, were 464. In October, it was 338. Now, there might be a balance there because the total number of fixed penalty notices issued in April was 5, and in October was 60. So whether or not we're actually getting to the fly tipping, knowing who's done it, and then finding them. But if you would like to find me some money from Theresa May's magic money tree, I will open the tip 24/7 for you. Councillor Mr Scott, 2 wrongs don't make a right in discussion with it. So it's okay for you to do it, but not for us. Okay, right. Christmas markets. It's not a viable proposition. We've had this conversation, Councillor. If you can find me someone who's willing to come and put a Christmas market on in Blackpool, I am more than happy to have a discussion with them, as would the bid, I'm sure. But it's to do with the demographics of the town, which was actually explained to you at the last meeting. Councillor Mrs Callow, phone calls. Yes, I found out about that myself, and I was not very happy. It has been explained to me, and I don't think it's an excuse, and it's something I'm going to take forward more, that it is to do with the local plan part 2, and they are seemingly within their rights, if you will, to phone people. But I am going to continue having that discussion, rest assured, because I'm not happy about it myself. And for them being pushy, obviously, we'll have to speak to the company that's doing that, because you should have the option straight away, if you don't want to do it, to opt out, and that should be the end of the conversation. And Councillor Ryan, yes, road disruption. We have had officers out timing the routes since the closures, coming from both north and south. And the first couple of days, it took them a lot longer, but now it's possibly an extra 5, possibly 10 minutes on their journey. And Councillor Luke Taylor, yes, unfortunately I can't be there, but I'm sure you'll do a fantastic job. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Thank you. We now move on to our Cabinet Secretary of Resilient Communities, Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Before I do present the report, I just want to make a couple of additions, if I may. One of them is in relation to Leighton Primary School. I'm pleased and I'd like to pass on my congratulations. Sorry.
I think there's a declaration of interest.
Oh, declaration of interest? Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, also, Mr Mayor, I'm a governor at Leighton Primary School. Personal interest.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Apologies,
Mayor.
Councillor Kane.
Sorry about that. Just want to put on record congratulations to the head teacher, all the other teachers, all the staff, all the pupils, all the governors and everybody that's involved. The recent Ofsted the recent Ofsted inspection resulted in them getting outstanding, and it's a credit to everybody concerned. And the more and more outstanding schools that we can get in Blackpool, the better it will be. So I'd like to just put on record thanks to everybody that was involved there, and it was a credit to everybody. Secondly, Mr Mayor, if I may, I'm really, really pleased looking around the chamber at the number of officers and the number of councillors that are wearing the white ribbon. The White Ribbon campaign aims to educate and raise awareness of violence against women and organise men to be part of the solution. Supporters of the campaign are asked to pledge never to commit, condone or remain silent about men's violence against women and girls in every aspect and every form. Within Blackpool, being clear that all violence and abuse is not acceptable to any form of gender, race or creed. I'd just like to share with the Chamber some data that comes from the NSPCC, if I may, Mr Mayor. And there's some startling figures here, but I think it's pertinent that with the White Ribbon Day coming up on Saturday, followed by 16 days of action, that this just brings to the surface just to the extent of the problem that we're facing. And I hope that those people that are not wearing a white ribbon tonight will wear one on Saturday and then for the next 16 days. Just to share the data with you, Mr Mayor, from the NSPCC. Around 1 in 5 children have been exposed to domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is a factor in over half of the serious case reviews. A third of children witnessing domestic violence are also experienced another form of abuse. 1 in 5 teenagers have been physically abused by their boyfriends or girlfriends. And 130,000 children live in households with high-risk domestic abuse. Mr Mayor, it's time to put an end to this, and only by raising awareness and for men to speak up with boys and working in partnership with schools, colleges and partners is the only way that we're going to get inroads to this. So I hope that everybody will support the campaign starting on Saturday. I'm pleased to say that the tower will be in white and the white ribbon emblem will be flying from the town hall for the duration of the 16 days, with the exception of one day, which is Lancashire Day. But I'm really, really pleased that I'm pleased and proud, Mr Mayor, to be one of the ambassadors for Blackpool, and that every opportunity I've had over the last few weeks at any meetings I've been at, I've been raising the profile, and I hope that everybody else can continue to support. Thank you, Mr Mayor. With that, I'll answer any questions I can on the report that was presented to Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kane. Councillor Owing.
Just a remark that Leighton Primary School has just been discovered to be excellent and outstanding. It was just as good when I went there, Mr Mayor.
And I'll make the comment, it created some wonderful people then. Any more? Page 17. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, it's the final paragraph at the bottom of page 17. I note there that the Fylde Coast Academy Trust are leading the new projects into mathematics, which I think is brilliant. I can remember a few years ago, I think Councillor John Jones would have been the cabinet member, and I did raise the idea that if you want to raise standards in Blackpool, then you can use FCAT, which was in its embryo state, and also the teaching school. Both are sub-companies of the sixth form college, of which I declare an interest because I've been a director there for 10 years. And I know that the Fylde Coast Academy Trust, on a constant basis, are always assessing and reassessing the needs for our local students. And I fully support this, that you're using FCAT, because maths is obviously one of the main pillars of education along with English, and whatever we can do to improve the attainment of our children, it bodes well for Blackpool. And so congratulations. I hope we do very well with it. You've got my support.
Thank you. Did I see your hand go up, Councillor Williams? I thought you put your hand up earlier. Forgive me. Are there any more speakers on page 17? Page 18? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm referring to Public Health Annual Report, and in particular, opiate treatment. I've noticed we now have a new contract with a firm which was signed by Councillor Kane, and I just want to go over some figures. Opiate drug users successfully completed treatment. Years 15-16, 130. Years 16-17, 164. Years 17-18 at the half year, 49. Non-opiate, years 15-16, 107. Years 16-17, 156. Years 17-18, year to date, 21. Alcohol successful treatment, 15-16, 344. 16-17, 450. 17-18, year to date, 129.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, apologies, Councillor Williams. I think Councillor Williams is going to refer to the Delphi medical contract. I am a non-executive director of the Calico Group of companies.
I didn't mention the name, Mr Mayor, intentionally.
Okay, thank you.
No need to declare it.
Thank you for your understanding.
I just wonder if the portfolio holder could explain why these drastic drops in treatment in regard to the new supplier. Is it because it's new? Is it because it's a teething problem? But these are huge drops from previous years and in important sectors of problems that really face this town. You see drug dealing on the streets. It's open. We've got a huge drug problem, huge alcohol problem, and we've got a good service, or we had a good service, to put these people in treatment. It's obviously not working. It's failing. And just as a question, why? Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm on the same page, another question if I could today, actually, Mr Mayor, on looked after children. I think the portfolio holder agreed, after I requested a couple of councils ago, that he would report the numbers of looked after children at every meeting. And again, he's failed to do so. It would help. What gets measured gets done. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Galley?
Brilliant. Thank you, Mr Mayor. It was just to follow up on the Blackpool opportunity area, and that we've been selected as a pilot, and how much I welcome that scheme. I did have a number of questions for the portfolio holder on that scheme, Mr Mayor. The first one, I noticed it talked a lot about in terms of improving teaching in certain areas. Math, science were mentioned quite a lot. I take it within the report there will be also a lot of attention around reducing the number of agency-based teachers. The importance of having one stable teacher through each academic year is crucial, and often a change of teaching or change of teacher all too often can reduce patterns and standards and so on. The other area that I had a question is, I couldn't see any mention of a town-wide bullying strategy in there. Again, something else that will impact on a student's ability to learn, their confidence, and all the qualities that we learn when we're teenagers. The third question is around cornerstone employers, and I welcome the fact that we're trying to inspire our children through connections with outsiders, so businesses and so on. Because when I read the report, I suddenly realised back to my own youth, that I was actually one of those statistics in there, because I, as a 16-year-old, failed my English, GCSE, maths and English. I was one of those. I was one of these people that actually my school didn't really deliver. So I recognise some of the things that we're trying to achieve through this report, Mr. Mayor, and I can't put enough value on the fact that the importance of a mentor from somewhere else can give a child somebody who will say, actually, this is the right path. You can turn your life around. You may be 18, you may be 21. It's not too late. But if we can get them when they're 13 and say there's a big world out there, it's a really powerful thing. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Any more questions? Page 18. Page 19. Sorry? Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Callow. Councillor Mrs. Callow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do feel that this is the most important item on the agenda today, and that is independent safeguarding review. Members may recall that I raised this at the last council meeting some 9 weeks ago, 63 days. Since then, I've had a meeting with the head of adult social care. That was on the 27th of September. I've spoken to the son of the deceased gentleman, who told me some more details about the neglect that he claims to his father. One of them was that he arrived at the house, had a look in the book that is signed off by the carers, and it said that his father had had tea and toast, and the time and date was there. He felt the kettle, it was stone cold. There was no sign that any toast had been made. And this was a male carer. The case that was at the coroner's and highly publicised throughout the country was a female carer. This was just another instance of neglect claimed by the father of the deceased gentleman. The Gazette report of the 3rd of October, the coroner has asked for a report from Safe Hands in 56 days from that date. I just wondered if the portfolio holder could tell me what progress had been made, apart from talking about this. What is the time span for this action to be completed? We have got very many vulnerable people out there that are being cared for in their homes. And one day, it may be one of us. We've got to get this sorted out. I know that you only get perhaps 1 or 2 poor carers, but when the damage is done, like it was to this poor gentleman, it is too late. And the heartbreak and distress that this has caused to his family is unimaginable. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more questions? Page 19. Page 20. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm referring to the annual release of data from the National Child Measurement Programme, and there are some within this report, some very encouraging numbers in terms of obesity, but I would like to refer to the report in general, because it's very easy to be selective about some of these figures. I just want to refer to the final chart within the report, which indicates that in years 10 to 11 in Blackpool, 17 out of 21 schools are in the red zone for obesity. In the reception ages 4 to 5 years, there are 10 in the red zone of obesity, and a final 9 in the second row of close to being in the red zone. So whilst I'm encouraged by his figures and these selective words, the real facts are that we do have an obesity problem in Blackpool schools, and I'd like to know what we're doing about it. I've got a second one, if I could as well, please. No, I'll leave it at that, I think. We'll secure it at that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more questions? Page 20. Thank you. Page 21. Thank you. Any general questions or comments? Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before the meeting, I spoke with Arif Rajpur, who's our Director of Health and Services, and I pointed out something to him which I'd seen had started in Kent with a national health application which calls Waitless, W-A-I-T-L-E-S-S. And it's a clever little app on a smartphone which tells you which emergency services or which medical centres within the town, their waiting times at current time, transport situations to get there, and also, I think, in some cases, the best place to go for certain types of illnesses or accidents. I'd just like to encourage the portfolio to work with Arif on this. He thinks it's a good idea. I'd like to see if it's viable. I think it's quite clever. It's reduced visits to accident and emergency in Kent by 5% already, and it's only been going a few weeks. So I'd just like to point that, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I believe the next one was Councillor Mrs Scott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Oh, there we go. Councillor Kane, with regard to the White Ribbon, I fully support the White Ribbon campaign. However, I was a little disappointed to read on the card that came with the ribbon that it promotes ending male violence against women. And I would like to hope that this council could extend that to all types of domestic abuse. Women against men, men against men, women against women, and also against children. So, as I say, I will wear my ribbon, but I will be promoting all aspects of domestic abuse, not solely male violence against women. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Mrs Callow? No.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Regarding domestic violence, as a magistrate, I've seen many cases come to court where women have made a statement against the culprit only to arrive at court and withdraw it, saying that at the time they made the statement they were drunk or drugged and they didn't know what they were putting in the report. But thankfully, nowadays, the police still proceed. Whether the victim wants to withdraw it, it is more difficult, but the police are now totally opposed to domestic violence. At one time, perhaps 20 or 30 years ago, it wasn't taken as seriously as it is now, and I fully support this campaign. I think people tend to think that it's a man being abusive to a woman because they're normally the stronger partner, but we realise that it is throughout the whole of relationships, and I do hope that this campaign deserves all the success that it can get, and I fully support it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kello. Are there any more questions on general comments, rather? No? Thank you. Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. What can I say to the people that went to Leighton prior to this? It's well done to everybody. You know, Councillor Mrs Callow, Councillor Owen, and anyone else who went there, you know, yes, it probably was good then, but to get this official endorsement from Ofsted, I think is a credit in this modern day world. Councillor Clapham, the work that we're doing with FCAT, yeah, we continue to work with FCAT, and they have proved that they can do what they said they were going to do, and they're expanding, so which is a good thing. So, you know, picking up on what you just said there with the math and the English are paramount, and yeah, thanks for your support on that one. Councillor Williams, you referred to all the figures that you gave out there. I'm not going to repeat them all, the opiate use. Your main thing was why are the figures down? Yes, there's a new provider. I'm not saying that is the reason, but the way that the figures are now worked out, we know about the methadone, taking people, reducing the use of methadone. We've got people into jobs by working with those people. So there's work going on there, and I must make aware that the project that we've got with Fulfilling Lives, that is the one that we'll now be able to move forward with to help further reduce those numbers. We don't know, you know, I can't singly say that that figure is as a result of the change of the contract. What I'm saying is that we're working across public health, across the lottery project Fulfilling Lives and the new provider, and I'm hoping, and I'll keep an eye on those figures that make sure they come down. You refer to the like numbers, and I could give you the like numbers, but it changes every week. There's a lot of work going on with like numbers. A lot of people come out, and there's a lot of churn. So there is work going on there. The scrutiny committee are fully aware, and they're fully involved, and they cross-examine myself and the director. So those figures are available, and cross-party scrutiny often review them. Councillor Galley, you refer to the opportunities, improving teaching, reducing agency. Bearing in mind that a lot of the schools, certainly all our secondary schools, are all academies. What I can say is there's work ongoing there with the School Improvement Board, of which my Cabinet member sits on there along with senior officers. You mentioned about the no bullying strategy. Each school has its own bullying strategy. Last week, for those that weren't aware, it was Anti-Bullying Week, and I was at an event organised at the De Vere, where there were people from schools there on the Anti-Bullying Week from all over the country, which we were really proud to host. We mentioned about the mentors. Yes, it's a great thing, and the earlier we can get mentors, the better. Again, getting mentors, particularly with the our care leavers, and one of the pledges was people became a friend for life. That's involved in the Head Start, so that again, become a friend for life, and people can pledge to do that. You can easily become a friend for life through the Head Start project. Councillor Mrs Callow, safeguarding review regarding time span and the issue we've got ongoing there. We have entered into a full service review of what we do. We have asked our independent chair for safeguarding to appoint an independent person to carry out that review. We are concerned, I'm concerned about the issues that have been raised. You did refer to a meeting that you'd had with the Director of Adult Social Services. The new head of independent safeguarding person has been appointed and started on the 1st of November, and I know that that's on her agenda to ensure that this review takes place as soon as possible. And believe me, we don't want any more of those incidents, and we do want to get to the bottom of it, and that review will see there, and I'll ensure that you get further meetings, because I had the feedback there that you welcome the meeting that you had, of which you were able to give you a bit more detail that I can't give in a public domain at this moment. Councillor Williams, you mentioned about the figures and why they're selective. They're not selective. Those are figures that have come out. They're figures we're sharing. I didn't need to put all those figures in that report, but we did, because it's good news. What are we doing about it? There's people still obese. Yes, we know about that. That's why we were one of the first towns to sign the Healthy Weight Declaration, and that is why our hospital, our Victoria Hospital, was the first NHS organisation to sign such declaration. We're also seeing, and you're a big fan of social media, and you'll have seen the number of improvements that are going on regarding the healthy options that cafes and takeaways are getting now by offering an healthy option. That again, that's growing from strength to strength. One thing when you say to me that, oh, selected, one thing that you weren't selected with is mentioning how good the free breakfast was for school children. That's a remarkable achievement. So selective comes both ways then, if you're referring to my report. It's a two-way street. Councillor Williams, you mentioned about the app. We'll look into the app, because yeah, if it's a new thing, we'll look into it. You know, we've got an app now for fly tipping, for example, with the council, but we'll look into that one, definitely. Councillor Mrs Scott, I was quite careful on my opening remarks, and I made sure that I wrote them down before I actually came to say them. And I'll just repeat my final line on that one. with Blackpool being clear that all violence and abuse is not acceptable for any victim regardless of gender and race and creed. That's what I put onto there. So yes, we know that there's violence on same-sex couples, there's violence the other way, women against girls and boys, but this is, the campaign is a national campaign, and the figures say that the majority of those figures is violence against women and girls. And the whole campaign will then capture that violence is not acceptable against any person. So yes, I do understand what it does say on the card, but that's statistically that's why that's there. But yeah, it is for everybody. Mrs. Carroll, I can only just thank you for your support. I know that the police are on board. Lancashire became the first county to become White Ribbon accredited. That was with assistance from the Police and Crime Commissioner, Clive Grumshaw, and we've also got Chief Inspector Lee Wilson, who's one of our ambassadors in Blackpool. So I know that the police are involved and all the other partner agencies are. And thank you for your support, and I hope that we continue that support across the Chamber throughout the 16 days of the White Ribbon campaign. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We now move to agenda item 5 on page 23. Proposal to dissolve the Blackpool, Fylde and Wyre Economic Development Company and form an Economic Prosperity Board. And Councillor Blackburn to propose.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a bit of, I guess, administrative tidying up, really, as much as anything. Recognising that we are in the era of enterprise zones, members will know that as leader of this council, I am a director of the Lancashire Enterprise Partnership. I am also a member of the LEPS Enterprise Zone Governance Committee, representing not just the Airport Enterprise Zone, but also the Hill House Enterprise Zone in Wyre. It's therefore easier to operate under this new model than under the old company structure which exists, and I look forward to working with the leaders of Fylde and Wyre on the new Economic Prosperity Board, if this is agreed tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Seconder.
Formally second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak on this issue? Councillor Blackman, you have a right to reply. You're quite sure? And thank you. So we take a vote. Yes. And all those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous, is it? Yes. As close as I can make that to be. Thank you. Local transport plan, item 6. Councillor Campbell to move the recommendations.
Happy to move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor, and that's it. Thank you.
And seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted to second this. We've talked a lot this evening at the instigation of Councillor Callow. We've talked a lot this evening about events in 2011, and of course the local transport plan dates from March 2011, when the Conservative Cabinet, the Conservative Executive of this council, passed finally the local transport plan. And this item, Mr. Mayor, is merely extending the life of the plan that was passed by the then Conservative administration. And of course it includes something, doesn't it? It includes a tramway running up Talbot Road all the way to Blackpool North Station. And I thought, well, maybe this is a historic commitment. Maybe something's happened since the Conservatives committed to this, since they put the points in at the end of North Pier. And I thought maybe, you know, it's a long time ago. Maybe something's happened in that time that they haven't told us about. But then I discovered in January 2016, it's less than 2 years ago, an article in the Blackpool Gazette. Now, I know to my cost over the past week or so that the Gazette are capable of misquoting people. So perhaps that's what's happened here. But Councillor Williams writes, our main retail sector, sorry, the article is entitled Link Town Retail with Rail. And Councillor Williams writes, our main retail sector is a long way from our only railway station. A, it's not. B, we've got three railway stations, but never mind. And it doesn't enjoy a full bus service right to its doors. We need an entrepreneur to invest in extending the existing Hounds Hill Centre in order to provide a more enhanced offering that will both improve the current retail offer and attract new shoppers from out of town. Tick, Mr. Mayor. New IMAX cinema, new Wilkinson's development, new associated restaurants and shops development. And however, it's no good building new retail developments if we don't include a much more accessible and frequent transport service. Fortunately, our efforts, not his efforts, my efforts, but never mind, attracted the extra funding to extend the tram system up Talbot Road. This new track can provide a smooth exchange for rail travellers arriving in Blackpool, and that is part of his group's plan to revitalise this, not just this part of town, but to bring some common sense to our transport and retail offer. What I'd like to know, Mr. Mayor, is what's happened since then?
Thank you. So, Councillor Callow? Mrs. Callow. It's all right.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we got the money for the tramway along the promenade, we got it under a Conservative administration. We'd just taken over. It was on the verge of collapse because the government, a Labour government, didn't like the plans that the previous Labour council had put in place for the tramway. At that time, we had a very clever director called Jackie Potter and an excellent specialist on tramways. And so one weekend, they spent the whole weekend, along with Councillor Peter Callow, rewriting the submission to the government. It was successful because the submission had to be on economic reasons, not tourism. It had to help the whole Fylde coast and get people from Fleetwood in particular, a very deprived area, to jobs and prosperity, hopefully in Blackpool. So that was that. But in the local plan, we did put that we had aspirations for a tramway. Nobody will take that away up Talbot Road. The leader has now quoted Councillor Williams. We won't take that away. If it's in the Gazette, it must be correct. But since then, Mr. Mayor, we have listened to the people. And the people of this town unanimously almost do not want a tramway up Talbot Road. We've listened very carefully to all the arguments, and we have decided as a party to support the people of Blackpool who are totally opposed to this tramway going up Talbot Road, and that is why the Conservative group now support the traders and the people of Blackpool in their objections. Many years ago, when we were improving the tramway along the promenade, there was also talk of the trams going down Squiresgate Lane and to the airport, which would perhaps have been feasible because Squiresgate Lane is a dual carriageway and extremely wide. But unfortunately now, we have lost most of our airport, so that doesn't seem to fit in with the plans for the prosperity of Blackpool. But I can assure you, Mr. Mayor, that you've got to be very brave, I think, sometimes, to do what some people call a massive U-turn. But we have listened, and we have listened to the people and the traders, and common sense has overcome, and we are totally opposed to this tramway going up Talbot Road, listening to all the arguments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Friend. Councillor Mr. Callow. Thank you.
Well, the Conservatives are, in fact, the listening party. And we have listened to people. We've listened to the taxi drivers. We've listened to the business people. Okay? and we are now opposed to the trams going up Talbot Road. In fact, we voted against them going up Talbot Road in this council chamber. You are still Sorry? We did.
Thank you. One speaker.
So, all except one, did you say? Oh, well, can't we ignore the one? Oh, can't we ignore the one? Anyway, I didn't ignore it.
Order, please. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Let the speaker
anyway,
speak.
The thing is, we voted against it. Voted against the trams going up Talbot Road. Now, you probably don't know this, but I'm a resident of this town. I was born here and raised here. We had trams all over the roads of Blackpool. And what a nuisance they actually were. There were people coming off bikes. I came off regularly. There's a friend of mine who's now an alderman. He delivered groceries for his father. He kept coming off. Steve Weaver broke his arm. This sort of thing. Yeah. So the fact is, we are now against it, and we have said so. We have said it a while ago. You didn't say anything about it then, and you've done, and actually, you've not done anything about it now. You've not done a damn thing about it. So, are you going to get on with it and get it finished? Go on, right? Or throw it out like we want you to. All right? Yeah, right, good. No, the thing about it is, I got the trams, the new trams here. You can cheer if you want. Sadiq Khan came. Who's Sadiq Khan, you say? Well, he was a transport minister, and this was his first assignment. And what did he say? You can have these trams, Peter, and if you have any problems, you come to me, and I promise I will help you. I never spoke to him again, actually, because he became the Mayor of London. So that was the end of that. So you're saying that I put those junctions in? Not at all.
Thank you, Councillor. Your time is impeccable. The red light has just come on. Thank you. It was Councillor Williams next, Councillor Galley.
Mr Mayor, I don't deny anything I said in the paper at all, but I think in some terms I was referring to our retail sector and the availability to get to it. There's a huge gap between Bickerstaff House, if you like, and the Hounds Hill Centre. And I don't think the Hounds Hill Centre is well served with transport. And at the time, I think if we could have extended the Hounds Hill, and I meant through the town, not just a block, into a better retail environment for the whole of Blackpool, it would have made sense. But the difference between the trams along the promenade and this one going up Talbot Road is safety. The tram system works on the promenade because it's segregated, Mr Mayor, from cars. This isn't. It's segregated from pedestrians. This isn't. And I keep hearing the comparisons with Fleetwood, how safe Fleetwood is. Well, if you look at the local results, you'll find that it isn't that safe. There's been a couple of accidents recently. I'm sure safety is uppermost in our minds for doing this. But also about the listening party, which Councillor Keller referred to. We are. Because if you were listening, you'd realise what the people out there are actually saying. Did you realise there is a petition which is almost full? Nothing to do with me, you'd be pleased to know. Nothing to do with me. Actually instigated by a Labour voter to say that this council is not listening to the people of Blackpool. That petition is going to Westminster. Now, if they didn't believe that, if they didn't think that, Mr Mayor, they wouldn't have started the petition. And it's been signed, as far as I can see, faster than any other petition I've seen in Blackpool. You've got to start listening to the people you're serving. You know, we talk about a people's panel. We are the people's panel. You're not listening to your own constituents. Oh, you're leading, right. You're leading the way where the other sheep will follow. Is that right? Well, in this case, the sheep aren't following. They're rebelling. And I think the first
one speaker. Sorry.
I think the first sign I saw was a picture yesterday of an Oyster outscarf with Labour outscarf written on it. I'm sorry. I'm not wearing it tonight, but I'm sorry. You're not listening to the people of Blackpool. Get off your high horses. Stop looking at your own agendas because you think it's absolutely essentially the right thing to do. People are telling you it's the not. And you'll find out sooner or later that they're right.
1 minute. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Galley. Thank you. Could we just have one speaker this time, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Everyone will be pleased to know my view hasn't changed. I still support it. However, I would remind everybody that this item isn't about the tram extension. It's actually about the transport local plan. Now, I'll be voting against the local transport plan tonight in terms of its extension for several reasons. And it's not about the tram debate. We've had the tram debate, and it's going ahead, hopefully, if we get the approval from the government. However, in terms of the local transport plan, in terms of the concerns I have, this is such an important piece of work, and it's almost shameful, Mr. Mayor, that in 5 years we haven't got a new plan ready to go. Now, I know it says here the mitigation is, well, we were waiting for the combined authority, but what great way, if we were to go into bed with the combined authority, if that was ever to be approved, there was no guarantee about the date when it would be approved, that we, Councillor Blackburn? Councillor Williams, sorry, am I just going to say it? Sorry. No, it's really important, though, this is a really important area, because without knowing what we wanted in Blackpool, then how could we talk to Lancashire about it? And that's really what we should have had, because this governs everything from our highways, our pavements, our potential parks and rides. Nottingham have just this week been commended about pocket park and rides. They're moving forward at such a rate of knots with what they're doing with their tram extensions and how they're integrating all forms of transport. And it does pain me that we're actually just delegating this position, this power to an officer. And no disrespect to the officer, he's very good at what he does, but I would much more rather see a collegiate approach with the elected members through scrutiny to have this conversation, to say, well, this is how I feel our wards could contribute. We know a piece of land that could work to connect with X, Y, Z. And that's the sort of conversation we should be having tonight. The tram debate has been done. It's not in this item. However, I will be voting against it because it's pretty shameful. In 5 years, we're still saying this is the Conservatives' plan from 2011. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Hara.
Yeah, you know, I don't speak very much. I must disagree with Councillor Williams because all the people I speak to are in favour of the tram going up to the North Station. And I think the reason for this being put back is because once that tram is up to North Station, a transport plan will be needed that's up to date with everything that's been done. I mean, I speak to people that come to Blackpool regularly on holiday, and when you mention to them that there's going to be a tram up to the North Station, they say, whoopee, what a good idea. And I think we've got on total disagreement that the people I talk to are very much in favour of the tram. It'll bring Blackpool back to life. It'll improve everything when you get off the train at Blackpool North Station, and I think it's a wonderful idea. And I think this motion is ideal because it gives us a chance to replan the transport of Blackpool in the future and for the 21st century. And the trams, when Councillor Callow was a little lad, were a completely different item to what they are now. And there's councils throughout this country that wish that they'd never done away with the trams in the first place, but they'd improved them and they'd changed the plan. I saw a minister, I think he's called Charles Clark, say that he wanted to encourage people to have trams and that sort of transport up and down to stations and bus stations, which we can't have in Blackpool anyway. And I just think it's terrible that they're going against something that will vitalise Blackpool around Bickerstaff House, behind the railway station, and the new hotels and everything else that's going to come to Blackpool.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara. Councillor Howen. I thought you'd put your finger up. Do beg your pardon.
Mr. Mayor, wisdom, folly, all these words, and ignorance, I suppose, is the big one. For anybody out there, I can understand why they would be concerned about spending a pile of money on a 400 stretch of tramway. But people in this chamber ought to have a little bit more understanding, a little bit more knowledge, a little bit of nous. Because this is a major transport strategy for the whole of the Fylde coast. Now, it isn't as if Blackpool suddenly got the money and we decided to go out on a frolic of our own and spend this money on something which others, even across the chamber, might look upon as frivolous. This hasn't come from Blackpool Council taxpayers. The funding of this capital infrastructure has come from government, from this Conservative government. Now, it's also, of course, the partnership with the Lancashire authorities. They've all been convinced by the work that's gone on by traffic engineers of great experience and know-how who have considered and have satisfied government and Whitehall that this is a sensible way of spending rare resources. So it's a long-term thing, Mr. Mayor. It's not an instant little answer. All the infrastructure from the private sector will flow from this public initiative. It's a major indication of government support, yes, a Conservative government, supporting Blackpool and the Fylde coast. And it is stupid for people who ought to know better to be fanning the flames of ignorance, and the people out there really are scratching their head why we should be spending so much money. We are spending it as agents of government, central government, and none of us should forget that. We're here as trustees, not of this generation, not of this townsfolk, but of our kids to come. We need this investment, Mr. Mayor. We need everything which will fall from it.
Thank you, Councillor Ock. Are there any more speakers? Thank you. And then it's, would you, Councillor Blackburn? Sorry. Councillor Campbell, wasn't it, the proposal? Do forgive me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was pretty heated. Yeah, okay. So, I agree with Councillor Galley that it is slightly disappointing that it's a refresh, but obviously you can see that is for a reason, so I'm disappointed that you can't vote with us on this. But it's about the new plan, as it says in 5.3, will enable the emerging regeneration position to be considered from a transport angle, which is obviously the important thing, given all the stuff that's happening at the moment. I never really took any notes there, I wish I had, but if we can just cover a couple of things there. Councillor, I think it was Councillor Mr. Carroll, said that you're the listening party now. That's fantastic, but when you actually approved that plan in 2011, you obviously didn't listen then, if people are so against the tramway, which I think is a complete nonsense. You talked about being brave. Well, this side are being brave, and we will plough on with it, and we will put a tramway up Talbot Road. And as you've seen, Councillor Williams, we're all for it 18 months ago, and I'm really surprised you're not all for it now, because it's going to be a fantastic thing for this town. We have seen the petitions going around. Yeah, disappointing, but it's to be expected when you do something like this. Not everyone likes it, and I accept that. But one particular petition talks about how there should be money available for shop fronts in Talbot Road. Well, I can actually tell this council, if they weren't already aware, that there will be money available for shop fronts in Talbot Road, and that's not through any kind of pressure from Facebook or Twitter or any kind of social media. There will be someone going out from the economic development team after the new year to explain to everybody on Talbot Road how they go about applying to that fund. And you'll see these going around, I'm sure, over the next little while. Blackpool is open for business, slightly more difficult than it used to be, just for a short period of time. I do have lots of dates here, I've not read them out. If anyone would like them, I'm more than happy to furnish them with them. We are open for business, unlike a lot of social media posts that I've seen over the past few days. And what we're doing, we talk about being brave and bold, and I'm doing this as the portfolio holder for my children. I'm not doing it for me. I'm very unlikely to use that tramway. But we are, as Councillor Kane and I decided today, we are building a better Blackpool. And this is just a small part of it, the transport plan. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. There will now be a vote taken. Recorded vote requested. 5 members to show, please. You have 4 as I count there. Oh, was that 5? Okay. You're voting for, sir?
Mr Mayor, recorded vote on the motion in the name of Councillor Campbell. Please could members indicate their answer with either yes, no or abstain. Councillor Benson? Yes. Councillor Blackburn?
Yes.
Councillor Kane?
Yes.
Councillor Mrs Maxine Callow?
No.
Councillor Peter Callow?
No.
Councillor Campbell?
Yes.
Councillor Clapham?
No.
Councillor Gary Coleman?
Yes.
Councillor Collett?
Yes.
Councillor Critchley? Yes. Councillor Cross?
Yes.
Councillor Elms?
Yes.
Councillor Galley? Councillor Mrs Henderson? Left, sorry. Councillor Hobson?
Yes.
Councillor Humphreys?
Yes.
Councillor Hunter?
Yes.
Councillor Hutton?
Yes.
Councillor Kirkland?
Yes.
Councillor Matthews?
Yes.
Councillor Maycock?
Yes.
Councillor Mitchell?
Yes.
Councillor O'Hara?
Yes.
Councillor Owen?
Yes.
Councillor Roberts? Councillor Robertson?
No.
Councillor Rolson?
Yes.
Councillor Ryan?
Yes.
Councillor Danny Scott?
No.
Councillor Michelle Scott? Councillor Singleton? Councillor Smith?
Yes.
Councillor Stansfield?
No.
Councillor Ivan Taylor?
Yes.
Councillor Luke Taylor?
Yes.
Councillor Lynn Williams?
Yes.
Councillor Tony Williams?
No.
Councillor Mrs Wright?
Yes.
Mr Mayor?
The Mayor will abstain.
Mr Mayor, members have voted as follows: 27 for the motion, 10 against and 1 abstention.
The motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you. We now move on to motion 7A, Alligates. Councillor Humphreys to move.
Good evening. You've all got the motion in front of you, so I'll just explain why I wish you to support this. I'm hoping to get a yes from Councillor Stansfield, because it will sort out fly tipping. And what it is about is basically that in the Clean Neighbourhoods Act of 2005, there is a small section in that which, if we have it removed, we will be able to have alligates which are considered to restrict entrance to houses, because the houses only have access and egress behind the gate. My proposal is the fact that they have a alley-gate key, so they have a regular access to their homes. It seems a nonsense to actually have something that is a weapon against antisocial behaviour, against fly tipping, against all sorts of things that go on in alleyways that we would rather not talk about. And all I would say is that if we could pass this and write a letter and try and get this law changed, because it just contradicts everything that the actual Alligate law stands for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Seconder? Thank you very much. Councillor
Seconded.
Thank you. That was one of the quickest secondings I've ever seen. Thank you. No speakers? Ah, yes, we have. Councillor Stansfield. I think he just got before. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I am in favour of the motion, but I do have a couple of concerns. And that is that we already have alligates in Blackpool where residents have their single access behind those alligates, some of which were there prior to the alligates being put in. Some have been there, put in after the alligates. So the planning permission has actually been passed where it is behind. So I find it quite odd that we've now got a motion coming to council when this practice is already taking place in the town. Surely, if we need this to take place, the actions that have gone on in the past haven't been done correctly. And I find it quite strange that this has now come before council to have this altered when we do have this already in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mr. Scott.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was about to say the same thing, really, because in our award we have a similar situation where there is just a one alligate. So I'm quite surprised that there's a motion being put forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've had a prolific problem with one particular alley within Blackpool for the last 15 years, ever since this law was brought forward. It was due to be alligated, and it never was. Then the law came and they said they couldn't do it. And ever since then, Councillor Collett's father and myself have fought for this alley to be alligated forever. And they keep recording that this it cannot be done through this law. And I think it needs rescinding. You know, so I hope everybody will support this. And the alley that I'm talking about, for instance, is back Keswick Road and back Ashton Road. And you all saw the dumping of the rubbish with the lorry, and that was that back alley. If the gates had been there, it would never have been able to have dumped the rubbish. But we've had prolific problems ever since with that entry. It's the biggest bone of contention in my political life.
Thank you very much, Councillor Matthews. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an excellent notice of motion. I thank Councillor Humphreys for bringing it before us. And I do hope that all members will support it, although it sounds like some on the other side might not. But we've just heard that the Conservatives are the listening party. Just want to reflect on that for a moment. The Conservatives are the listening party. As Dennis used to say on Family Fortunes, Mr. Mayor, if that's up there, I'll give you the money myself. They've claimed to be the listening party, and then 5 minutes later, Mr. Mayor, two Conservative councillors have just stood up and said something which indicates quite clearly that they ain't listened, right? What has gone on in terms of alligating thus far is that we've alligated to the extent that we are legally allowed to. This change would allow us to alligate further. Whether or not somebody has successfully applied for planning permission with a primary entrance in an alleyway which is already gated is neither here nor there. It's completely irrelevant. This is one of the most simple, well-written motions I've ever seen. It stands in stark contrast to the one we're about to see. And that people haven't listened to Councillor Humphreys' very simple explanation of it and understood it, I find incredible. From the listening party, that is.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers? Oh, yes, thank you, Councillor Williams.
I find it quite amazing, actually, that we're being judged before we voted. We support the motion. I think it's just a little bit of confusion where one or two members, where they've got similar examples, weren't aware of the difference between the legalisation and the individual planning permission. We just weren't aware of that. Yeah, it seems to be breaching it. But we are fully in favour of this motion. And well done to Councillor Humphreys. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Williams. Right. I beg pardon, Mrs. Wright. Just
New
wanted to
name
change
now,
your mind a bit.
Mr. Mayor. You're forgiven.
Bless
No,
you.
I just wanted to say that this would be really good for in my ward. I have only one set of alligates in my ward. Only one. And we put it up because the residents were fed up with the fly tipping. But at the back is a piece of land which has had planning permission for years and they've never built on it. And the whole point, they were put up and told, yes, we'll agree to put them up and we paid for them, but if they start to build at the back, they'll have to come down. Well, I know them residents will be as chuffed as anything if this goes through, because then they won't have to lose the gates when the properties are built, if they're ever built. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any more speakers? Then we shall put this to the vote. Sorry? Oh, yes, of course, forgive me. Right to reply.
I'm quite happy not to reply other than to say thank you if you all support it. I haven't anything more to add. I think everyone said what they need to say. I understand where Councillor Stansfield is coming from because I've sat very close to him in planning. Not that close, but close enough. So I do understand where the complications are, but that is why why we need to do what we need to do now. We can't go back in time, sadly. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Right, thank you all. All those in favour, please show. I find that unanimous. Thank you. Was there an abstention? Oh, I do beg your pardon, Councillor Ryan. Oh, very good. Right, thank you. We now come to motion 7B, waiving of car park charges. There is an amendment. The meeting is to be asked if it consents to Councillor Williams altering his notified motion, the details of which were circulated to members earlier this week. This is in effect means replacing the 18th of December date with the 1st of December. That is correct, sir? Thank you. So I'm going to ask the council to vote on if you will allow the replacing the 18th of December with the 1st to begin at the 1st of December. Is everybody understanding on that? All in favour of bringing it to the 1st of December, please show. Thank you. Those against? I'm afraid that that amendment falls. Thank you. So the motion is for the 1st of December, I beg your pardon, the 18th of December, and you are about to propose it, I believe, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This follows on from, I think, the notification after I presented this motion that we would offer free car parking on the 23rd and 24th of December. Bit of a knee-jerk reaction, I think, to this motion more than anything else, because by that time, most people have done the Christmas shopping. It's finished. There's not much left on the 24th, but except in Blackpool, there probably will be. I'm not going to go on about the argument between whether, it's the transport that's happening now, whatever. And just to refer back to Councillor Campbell, it's not so bad now, is it? The diversions. And the reason for that, or one of the main reasons, is because people have stopped coming in to Blackpool. I went round the town yesterday and I spoke to more than 20 retailers who will tell you, if you listen, differently. So all I'm asking is that we extend that offer of free car parking, as other towns have done, including Wigan, Rochdale, Chorley, from the 18th, which is exactly a week before Christmas. Our traders are suffering enough. I just thought it would be nice to give them a little bit more help, because the simple reason is people are not coming into Blackpool. This might just help resolve the problem, and it would show to the retailers and traders of this town that we are trying to help through a difficult period, which, as you say, is brought on because of progress and it needs to be done. Well, fair enough. But let's just give them a break and show them that we're not all hard-hearted. We're not going to get the revenue anyway. It's going to be down. The figures will prove what I'm saying after Christmas. And we have the January sales. Those figures, I guarantee, will prove. And I've even got statements from retailers already. Give them a break. Listen to what they're asking. Let's show them that this council cares. It's only a few days more than already been given them. I would have liked it to have been from the 1st of December to show a real token. But all I'm asking is extend the free period, as you wouldn't accept my amendment, from the 18th, as documented in this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Galley.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very happy to second this motion. As I mentioned before, no one is more pro-tram extension than me. And at the same time, no one hasn't. To anywhere, exactly. Yeah. Yes, it won't stop here. When you build anything, as we've said a lot, there will always be pain. But sometimes that can generate a negative narrative. And I think it's really important that we do generate a positive narrative. As the theme goes, we're building a better Blackpool. And around that, though, we can also create a vibe, a positivity around that Blackpool is still open for business whilst we go through that pain. And that's why I'm happy to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callan. All right, thank you. Any speakers on this motion? Thank you, Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps by way of explanation, I should point out why we didn't accept the amendment. The clause in the Constitution which allows the mover of a motion to then amend it prior to the meeting, the point of that clause has always been that if something substantive has changed in that period of time, so had I have submitted a notice of motion, for instance, on the 13th of November, asking for the Chancellor of the Exchequer in his budget today to give us £100 million, and he'd done so, then I would have the right to change my notice of motion. That clause is not there so that people who've written a bad motion can change their mind after a few days and try and make it a bit better. So that's why we didn't accept the amendment, Mr. Mayor. But I do like to see Councillor Williams using a strong evidence base for his arguments. And the evidence of his own eyes and of all of these conversations, all real, I'm sure, with retailers and high street barons and no doubt lords and ladies and everything else. And he'd done all this by the 13th of November, when the deadline was for submitting a notice of motion. Except the roadworks didn't start until the 12th of November. So all of that detailed consultation, Mr. Mayor, and evidence gathering has taken place in less than 24 hours before he's reached the logical conclusion that the only thing to do about this is for us to give away £143,000 of revenue, which incidentally would be enough to keep the tip open for a few extra hours a week, as a knee-jerk reaction to something that he imagines is going to happen. That's not an evidence base, Mr. Mayor. That's another, all that is evidence of is sitting staring at Facebook and reading petitions signed by people that don't live here and have never been here.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Then, Councillor Williams, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I did put this motion forward, I had considered remarks made by some retailers and some traders in the town, and the experiences of people who have been trying to get into town, including my own relatives and neighbours. That was the reason for the 18th. I just thought that after the 2 days, 3 days or 4 days before Christmas, it would be a boost to trade in Blackpool. It might even bring other shoppers into town that may have gone elsewhere. I think it's a logical thing to do when other towns are doing the same. When I saw that the council were now offering free parking on the 23rd and 24th, I asked on my feet this week, retailers in Blackpool, was that enough? And the answer was no. They didn't think any of it was enough, really. Well, if you had a store or a shop in Blackpool and your livelihood depended on it, I don't know if anybody of you have, you might have the same thought. So I'm disappointed they're not accepting this, Mr. Mayor, but let me put it this way, I'm certainly not surprised. They're not listening.
Right. Will you now take the vote on this motion? All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All against? It has failed. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Councillors, that concludes our business this evening. Thank you all for being as you are.